So the recording is started. Great. I hope you're all well today. Welcome to the Wandering Wonderer podcast. Today is the 19th of April 2023. It's a Wednesday, and it is a beautiful day here in Belfast. I mean, it is gorgeous outside. The clothes are drying on the line. They're crispy dry in a few hours. Wonderful. So please excuse my sniffling today. My microphone is as far away from my mouth as I can put it on the headset. Um, I guess I should start with kind of I won't say I got cut off last night. I got disconnected from a chat last night, and when I called back and they gave me the opportunity to speak again, the microphone wasn't working for some reason, and I had really wanted to say to one of the lady contributors last night. I don't know if she's listening. I believe her name was Rebecca. She had quite rightly pointed out that I was quite crude when I had said the worst thing that had ever happened to the homosexuals was that they came out, because one time they used to have a wife and two kids, or a family to hide behind, and therefore they were reproducing. And when they came out, there was no longer a requirement to have a family to hide behind. So now they're not reproducing. And indeed, I may not have put it in such a fine terms. I was having a bit of a banter with a couple of people when I said it, and indeed they're not my words actually. It's I didn't think up of that concept. It was some more salubrious, I presume, homosexual man. I'm very certain it was a homosexual man that said it many years ago. Um, I can't remember precisely who it was, but it was a take he had on the, uh, I guess, the welfare of the homosexual community, and how the LGBTQP agenda really didn't deliver what it purported, or what the homosexual community had hoped would be delivered, which was equal status. Um, it turned into a supremacist movement. Um, it turned into a communist supremacist movement, and people got thrown by the wayside, and people got starved out and frozen out, and you know, the goals were controlled and realigned to suit a communist agenda. What has been delivered for the homosexual community over the last number of years, while held up as pride and a great achievement and all this, it really hasn't delivered what was hoped by the LGB community. And as with any civil rights movement, it became a target for hijacking, and the vehicle that it presented to interrupt civil rights conversations was too precious to just let off on its own, achieving what it was intended to achieve. It had to be commandeered, it had to be captured, and then it was turned into what we're seeing now, which is the sexualization of our children. And the two things are related in my mind. That homosexuals no longer have kids, or their own kids. Um, they don't have that cover story that they had used for centuries. Instead, they adopt other people's kids, or they they you know they don't reproduce themselves anyway. So now they're looking for they're trying to encourage these gay genes, or gay behavior, or gay conditioning at a younger and younger age, to bring others into the well, it would have been the gay community, but it's not. It's now the TQP community, the trans queer pedophile community, because if you can get them in there, then the drug companies and big pharma can get a hold of them and start making big coin out of them. So as with every movement in our societies, when we allow big money and big industry, you know, they offer sponsorship, and they get their foot in the door, and they start, you know, making people greasing palms, increasing the appetites and desires of the key players, bringing them to nice restaurants until they develop appetites that they need financial support. And once they have that, they can then start to make demands on the executives of whatever movement it might be. And it happened to the LGB community, and they became the TQP community. And it is interrelated, but I do apologize to Rebecca for my crudeness in my language. Maybe I could have been more delicate about that topic. And indeed, it's not a topic I'm a fish out of water with it anyway, you know. So when I'm in banter with it, I can imagine myself being crude, and I apologize for that. And I'll say no more about that. Maybe we'll get to talk again another day. So nobody with their hand up. Nobody got anything to say. Okay, cool. There's a few things I went a bit quickly over. Yeah, it was a bit of an epic rant yesterday. I was really on fire. I put a lot of effort into, well, not a lot of effort. I put a bit of effort into writing a few headings and things to talk about, and it was quite easy to flow through them. No, I try to make it segue from one thing to the other, so I leave pieces out when it's not appropriate. But sometimes it's important to go back and just fill out a few things. And one of the things I think actually it came up yesterday on this podcast. It was a podcast or Twitter Live or Twitter Spaces. I've never used it before, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I had to figure it out as I was going, and I had disconnected myself somehow, and it was a really nice conversation. There was a number of folk on there that I guess I have associated with, but hadn't actually had an opportunity to talk to. So that was pleasant, and to do that with in a public environment, a kind of a forum environment, it was nice. I enjoyed it, and fair play to Toby there. Toby Hotz on Twitter, great channel, great Twitter account. The man puts a lot of effort into his practical day. I mean, he goes out and does things and meets people and interviews people and approaches people and talks to people. This belly to belly stuff is really important, And if more of our talk was about the belly to belly stuff we're doing, day to day, face to face, this is we should be talking about these things. Talk about these events. I know you have them, you guys. I know you talk to people in shops, and I know you talk to people in queues, and when you get a chance and you bring the topics up, talk to people about those experiences. Make little quick videos, a minute and a half. Say, oh, I met this lady. We spoke about this, and she was. So if what you're doing is then you're educating people to the kind of keys that open doors. So if you find yourself in a situation that the doors open easily for you, you need to tell us, and we can share those things. And actually, that's a good point to bring up, is about my timeline. If you look at my Telegram page, my Telegram timeline, whatever you call it, you'll see a vaccine safety brochure. Well, it's just a sign. It's 2 PDFs, and they have just a nice, pleasant sign about reporting vaccine damage. That it's important if you've had health changes to report that to HIPRA, and it's a duty to report to HIPRA. And there's another website there, your vaccine safety. You'll notice it's not very scary. It's not very, it's very, I don't know, clinical. It's very logical. It's very direct. There's no particular types of manipulation. There's no grand marketing scheme. It's not some highfalutin marketing. It's just straightforward, plain and simple. And these signs are, this is an updated version, but a very similar sign has been in multiple locations all over the country. and stayed there for a year and a half and 2 years, and nobody took it down. So it's, when we create little PDFs like this, if we don't overdo it with the data and the facts and the frantic fear, if we just give them the evidence they need to make a decision in favor of the facts, maybe they might, and maybe they will, you know. And it's these little straws that break the camel's back, and it has such um, an effect when the stats back up what we're worried about. We're looking at a situation. I have a statistical problem at the moment, and I don't know how to square it away yet. I need to put more time into it. You guys have seen how the death rates have been increasing. The overall mortality, all-cause mortality, has been increasing exponentially in Ireland over the last number of months, year, 2 years. Um, um, but at the same time, then the other thing we have is the news out of Sweden that 95% of all adverse reactions came from 4.3% of the batches. And this would be really encouraging. Um, that as a raw stat is very, very encouraging. It's great cause for hope. Great cause for hope. But that said, it doesn't necessarily. It's a convoluted way to get that stat to match the increased all-cause mortality we're seeing. It's possible. I can think of scenarios, but I'm not qualified to verify those scenarios. So I'd appreciate if somebody out there will be able to rationalize those two statistical truths. What's coming out of Sweden regarding the adverse events all coming from less than 5% of batches, and the idea, the fact that all-cause mortality is so exponentially growing around the world. It's going around everywhere. So it's an interesting anomaly, and if we were a society that was focused on fixing the VD, then these kind of things would be all over the newspapers. They'd be all over the media, and these questions would be answered. I wouldn't. There'd be greater men than I thinking about such things. There'd be medical people and universities and hospitals all hanging on every word from Sweden. And they'd be going through our records. They'd be going through all of the blood samples. They'd be going through everything just to figure this out. But we don't have any of that because we have to cover it up. We have to cover it up because the egos of the people in charge are too that well nurtured and pampered that they could imagine that they would have made such a grievous error as they've had, and they can't fathom it. No more than the department putting out the pornography into children. When you use the correct sequence of mealy-mouthed words in government, you can pretty much do anything you want. If you use the correct sequence and arrange the slimy language that they use, the double speak in any way that they. I'm gonna have to cough. Excuse me. I'm still suffering. Give me 1 second. So that's basically where we are now. That if you have the correct greaseball attitude in government, you can push any sickness through as legislation. So, but one of the big things that I noticed up at Belfast was I heard some guys complimenting this last night, was the attitude of the PSNI, and how that has facilitated a great event. And it's to some degree it's true. It is true, but I'd be more concerned Why were the PSNI of that attitude? And there's multiple causes. Surely the craziness of the opposition, the lunacy of the doctrine, their own family status. There's, who knows what's going on inside in their workplace as a police person regarding all of this. So there's multiple causes. But by far, for me, the greater cause, I'd say it'd be 60% of the cause of the policemen's attitude on the day was the attitude of the women and the organizers of the event. It was clear to me that these were not ladies you wanted to have having an angry disposition towards you or anybody in your environment. These ladies are not people that I would like to have angry at me. They're not people I would allow others to provoke a confrontation between me and them. I would do everything. I do a lot in my power to prevent that other from creating a confrontation between me and those people. Um, I'd go to good lengths. I'd be damn sure that didn't happen. And that's exactly the attitude of the police. And we forget that we can invite tyranny. We forget that we can, by being nice, and the word is nice, by being nice, you can invite tyranny. You show that you're willing to let the thing onto the table before you start to negotiate, rather than keep the thing off the table by negotiating. Negotiating who gets to the table, who gets to put an input. You can preempt police control of your event or police. You see, the problem is that if your event interacts with the police, it gives off a bad vibe in on the camera. People at home go, "Oh, look, that's a policed event. I can't bring the kids. I can't bring Granny. There's a policeman at the event." So you have to be, and that's intentional. That's why they oppose us, is to create a scene that is less inviting for the family at home, the people you're trying to protect. So it's strategic. Um, so us in managing that situation, we have to be very forceful. Um, I think forceful is the method, but in your attitude is where it should betray forcefulness. That if the attitude that I'm negotiating in doesn't get me my result, I will become forceful. Now, I mean litigiously forceful. I don't mean that you're going to punch the police person. I mean that you know the law, you know the code of practice, you know the standards that are expected from the police, you know what's required in this situation, and if it's failed to be delivered, there is going to be consequences. And I will endeavour to make those consequences as far-reaching as possible. And you don't have the time, Garda, or police person. You really don't have the time for dealing with the mess I can create for you. And you then have to go and create that mess, because the only way that it doesn't happen again and again is that it becomes too much of an inconvenience for a particular guard or a police person to accept the railroading orders of a superior who is in support of a particular narrative. You can imagine in a police force there is particular pressure on police officers to be compliant inside the sexuality narratives that are so prevalent nowadays. So when those police officers are asked to police an event related to those narratives, they're in a difficult position. If they disagree with the narrative personally, they are in a very difficult position, because they have to obey what they're told to do, unless that is unlawful, unless the order is unlawful. But they can't just turn around and say to their superior, "I think the order is unlawful and I'm not going to carry it out." There's no evidence that the order is unlawful, only the say-so of the two police officers at that point, the superior and the guy carrying it out. But if that police officer had a letter in his hand that spelled out why it was unlawful and what the consequences of allowing that unlawful behaviour, um, or carrying out that unlawful order, or allowing unlawful behaviour at an event like that, then that police person can show it to their superior and say, "Look, if I obey your order, this person here has spelt out why it's illegal and what the consequences I will face. And they can just simply from that point, do you absolve me from these consequences? You know, you can the police person can then say to their superior, say, I want paperwork that says I'm protected from the consequences as outlined in this letter. And the other police person, he knows he has to provide that paperwork or rescind his order. And it can't just be an oral conversation between the superintendent and the bobby or the Garda. It can't. If it's that way, the Garda loses. He must compromise because he has nothing to back him up. It's not a courtroom he goes to. So in that system, the disciplinary system inside a police force, that police person needs a piece of paper in his hand that he can show an original. You know, it would be great if you sent him a signed letter rather than an email. It's so much more powerful. It's so much more in courtrooms. I know we like to think it's all one, but it's different. Nicely written, headed paper with a signed, it still has very much more power than an email or even just an ordinary letter or a form. It's just so much more. Uh, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I know judges appreciate it. I've seen it. So when we empower our police officers at these events to protect our natural rights, then it's things go much more smoothly. But unfortunately, because of the nature of our opposition, they're a disruptive opposition. They don't have any arguments. They don't have any points or facts. They just want to disrupt and derail, commandeer, take over. Um, so we can't have the sensibilities that we have when we approach each other. And we would mostly say that I don't want to involve the police in anyone's life. I don't like the idea of involving police or child services or anything like at the state in anybody's life. I'd have to be like in my worst arguments. I haven't resorted to such things. Um, it's just not in our. Nobody wants to bring that trouble on anybody. But this is asymmetrical warfare, and we are faced with a giant enemy. They're giant in their resources, but they're a relatively small number of people who lead around an equal number of just imbeciles by the hand and can wheel them out whenever they choose. But they do have significant weight because of their resources. And where we were dealing with Antifa and these people, these were the cultural paramilitaries. So we had a cultural movement that was ongoing in the years leading up to the lockdowns, and that then the paramilitaries of the cultural movement were Antifa. And what we're seeing now is the administrative paramilitaries, which is the NGO staff. But the NGO staff aren't the administration. They're literally the paramilitary wing of the administration. The administration is corporate, and we have to see these latest version of foot soldiers. These are the professional class who are working inside NGOs on 50,000 and 80,000 and 100,000 pounds a day or euros a day jobs. They have apartments and a car loan and student loans, and they're on the high life, on the pig's back. So that's who you're meeting on the street now. Where before you were meeting the people that were, we'll say the Antifa side, they would be the cultural people, musicians, marijuana smokers, DJs, the nightlife people, the cultural paramilitaries is who they were. These guys now who we're seeing are administrative. They're the front line of the administrative side of the narrative, uh, the globalist narratives. So it's a different. They scare easy. They're a different set of people again. They're very young, very sheltered, very inexperienced. They scare very easy, and actually there isn't a lot of value in running them off the streets because other than humiliating the administrative branch of this corporate NGO. Um, there's no particular value in getting into a confrontation with these people. You know, these are vertical patients. You know, if your sickness doesn't need you to be horizontal in a bed, then you're not staying in hospital. Okay, they're not going to keep you in hospital. That's just the way modern medicine is. So these are what you call vertical patients. There's modern Western medicine doesn't provide beds for these patients, and instead they give them tablets and send them walking around and doing that stuff. So these are the vertical outpatients, you know, of the pharmaceutical mental health industry, and we shouldn't give them any superlative description. They weren't a gigantic crowd. They're not a massive resistance. They're just a bunch of silly folk turned up to deprive us of our rights. That's as much credit as they deserve. Um, like they had a warm up programming event at 11 a.m. inside in Belfast City Centre for them, and they were bouncing around like a bunch of retards. It was just you know it was depraved. They were literally brought into the centre of Belfast for 11 a.m. for a programming session, and they all had their brains suitably programmed and a nice smile to put on their face before they came down to the salmon of knowledge, and defiled it with their ignorance. But yeah, that's really so. What I'm saying there is that your attitude at your assembly is exceptionally important. Your attitude leading up to your assembly is exceptionally important. You can't take any nonsense from anybody and make sure they're aware that if their actions result in the curtailment of your civil liberties, there will be immense consequences. You're not intending on committing an illegal act that day, and if you were, you would be subject to the law. And no one has a right to object to your behavior if it's not illegal. And if it's not illegal, they can just go away because they're depriving you of your civil rights to discuss things that aren't illegal. So unless they're reporting a crime, they have no right to be there. And unless they believe a crime is being committed, these people have no right to interfere with you in any way, shape, or form. And they solely do it to create an adversarial energy around your event so that it makes it more difficult for people to feel they could easily attend. We spoke of the bravery of certain people by removing their face coverings and such. The reason they have their face coverings on when they come to your event is because of this tactic, this Saul Alinsky rule for radical tactic of creating an air of adversary around your event. Anybody got anything they want to say? Lads, I'm doing an awful lot of talking. All right, okay. Let me fag again. Yeah, I touched off something yesterday, creation, and how for most of history, um, man didn't have the power of creation and that was reserved for God and woman. Woman had the power of creation. A woman could create a life. And all that man had to do was protect them both, protect and provide for them both. And that was man's function, sharpening sticks and banging rocks together, gathering food to provide and protect the creators, the Lord and the woman. And, things started to get complicated when man started to create. So I guess the wheel came first or farming came first, but these things redefined humanity and redefined life for men in particular. And men, especially men who farmed, they became very important creators. And indeed, society developed in a way that they valued farmers as creators. And I guess farmers and I guess builders were people who were seen as creators. They were with the technology that was available. That's what they could create, and they became more elevated in society. And indeed, society valued them as creators, and society developed a dependence on male creation rather than hunt and gathering to provide and protect. Men now were the creators of food, and that's a very, very important job. And men were then elevated to the status of women creating as a creator. And other things happened. It's not like there was currency and gunpowder and things like this. But certainly farming, it really changed the relationship between man, God, and woman. And I guess currency would do that as well. But it was the first time that society became dependent on men for food and creation. They were dependent, I guess, to a degree, for defense and for protection and to provide and protect. But that also changed with gunpowder, and it allowed um, corporations and people with big capital to get control of these really important uh, avenues of creation and defense. And these were momentous, momentous events in human history. And it's they seem antiquated, and we take them for granted. But these are really important things that changed, that were contrary to our biological evolution. And I know a lot of people talk about evolution as being a theory and whatever. For me, I don't subscribe to the idea that um, evolution is just a theory. Evolution is obvious, and it was never debated throughout all of history, even in tribes that were isolated in the jungles of South America. They could clearly see animals changing from one form to another when you breed them, and you could clearly see the relationships between certain families of birds and other families of birds and lizards and all these things. And we as a species have exploited the mechanism of evolution, which is um, variation. It's one of the major advantages of sexual reproduction is that it introduces variation, and it's been very, very advantageous for some species, for a lot of species, throughout all of their evolutions. Um, we can breed cattle. We can see markings and colorings on dogs and cats coming through from their parents. So we can see this system of variation without any dogma or any theories or any. Nobody's saying how it's happening at that point. Um, we can just see this change in animals as they go through generations, and we can pick out traits we like, and we can allow those animals to breed and not let the other rest of the population breed, and we can encourage that trait in the animal, and we do it all the time. And it's very useful to all kinds of industries. So the idea of evolution itself was never debated in history, and it still isn't. It still isn't debated, evolution. What's debated is what was proposed by Charles Darwin, which was the evolution occurred by means of natural selection. So the evolution part was never, ever debated. Um, I'm sure it was debated at some stage, or it was never up for serious question. It's obvious to farmers. Ask any farmer if there's variation between animals, they'll tell you. But the point that was contentious was that it occurred by means of natural selection, which negated, or was proposed anyway, negated the need for a god or a creator god. No, it negated the need for an interfering god, a god that I don't know. I don't know what. There was a controversy over it anyway, that it somehow took power away from God. I don't subscribe to that. But my point is whether or not Darwin's theory that evolution occurs by means of natural selection Darwin didn't think up evolution. Evolution was around forever, just no one ever tried to explain it or had a theory that would stand up to questioning regarding its mechanism. But we could always see, as I said, the Indians in South America could see evolution happening in front of their eyes. We can see it happening in front of our eyes. We may not be able to explain it. You may not be satisfied with how people explain it, or you may have argument about it, or you may prefer it to be one way of explaining it. That's all fine. But we cannot deny that evolution occurs and that animal goes from one form to another right in front of your eyes, one generation to the next. You can we do it all the time, and maybe it's our disconnection from farming and biology that allows questions like these to become popular. But it certainly wasn't popular when everybody was a small farm holder. So when I talk about evolution, I'm just talking about the evolution part. I'm just talking about I don't need to get into the controversy of why it happens to talk about evolution, and you don't need to feel threatened by that conversation. It's not a question of verifying Darwin or verifying anything else. It is a question of epigenetics. Epigenetics is really important to all of our lives, and it is an evolutionary driving force. And it's one of the hacks that they use to attack us. So we have to be aware of these evolutionary hacks that are in us, and we can use them. When you accept that they're there, then you can start to use those hacks to help yourself. And I think it's a duty. Our society has evolved beyond our evolution or biology, and we really have to start stepping up to the challenges that presents and the discipline that's required to maintain um, a cogent position and all of that. Okay, so uh, yeah, that's I mentioned about the brainwashing session up in Belfast prior to the event, but a lot of the controversy that has occurred around. Hang on, we've got Raven Loon here with his hand up. Hey, Raven Loon, how are you?
Hello there, my friend. I'm enjoying the chats there now, and that you've been having over the past while. I've been listening to you, and I respect you a lot. But I just wonder where you get your inspiration from.
Hmm. I don't know, my heritage, I suppose, my family. Yeah, Ireland. It's worth fighting for. It's the
Yeah,
only
I'm
thing.
in the garden now digging at the moment. The weather's fine, and I have you on the loudspeaker. There's nobody else listening, just myself and the birds and the bees, But I'm enjoying the old chat.
Good,
And I,
good.
I like you're no you're talking a lot of sense there now, and you might have seen me. I normally hang out on another channel anyway, without mentioning it. I
You
normally
can
hang
mention
out
another.
on another channel,
You can mention another channel.
the Phoenix Rising.
Oh, okay. Your voice sounds familiar to me, but
All
I can't
right,
place.
that's cool.
Okay. Um. Yeah. Well, thanks for the lovely compliments, and I'll go over to Stephen. Hey, Stephen,
Do
how's things, man? Hey,
How's it
Stephen,
going,
how's
Darren?
things?
How you
Miley,
doing?
man.
I seen or it was good to hear Raven Loon as well. I've spoke to Raven Loon a few times over on Phoenix Rising's channel. Um, but you brought up a brilliant point about Darwin there and evolution, and I know you were kind of on a trail of consciousness there. Um, but Darwin is what it was an example of what happens when you try to apply personal ideology to an objective, observable universe around us. Like you can see the change in animals, like you said, you can see things, but over the course of, let's say, millions of years, these variations in animals would ebb and flow. Darwin made these observations during a time where selective breeding was in a very excessive point. Like the royal institutions were overly inbreeding certain types of animals to get the best, like race horses, like hunting dogs. So Darwin was heavily influenced by selective breeding, more so than natural selection. And I think that's why he never could understand that concept, because he was brought up in that system of achieving the best. I mean, he had some really nasty ideas about the Irish and black people, and stuff that's just excessively over observant and unnecessary. Uh, you know, I would find, but like you correctly said, the natural evolutionary path is observable. Things do change over time based on the environment. And I was going to tie that into the whole fucking bullshit that went on up in Belfast. Those people will breed themselves out. And that's my point.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was saying to that lady last night. That if they get into the school, that's why they have to get this doctrine into school. You know, like the Jesuits said, give me the boy and up to the age of 7, and I'll give you the man. So they know that they have to get into the minds of the kids at a very young age in order to indoctrinate them into the lifestyle that they want. And the lifestyle that they want isn't what we're seeing now. We tend to think of the TQP, what they present today, these marches and this stuff, that's what the utopia they want. But I think it's something else, and that's just kind of a stepping stone into just complete depravity. And this is just kind of the recruitment drive, get into the schools and get them conditioned into accepting this depraved sexuality as good, and that's a much longer battle.
It looks like it's taking more energy in than they're getting out, though. They're at a deficit now.
Definitely.
When they try to like just create regular gay people with like social engineering back in like the 70s and the 80s, they thought that would bring down society, and it didn't. It just didn't. So they knew that they had to make it even worse to make society like terrible and destroy institutions. But
What do you
what you're
think is society's immunity to such endeavors? What do you think gives society its
I think this experiment we're observing, Dara, is proving that morality does exist outside religion, because you see groups like Gays Against Groomers popping up. So these would be people that, like, religion has absolutely neglected. High percentage of atheism in the gay community, and they are totally rejecting the attack on children.
Yeah, no, I accept the high level of atheism, doctrinal atheism, but I do believe that there's a high percentage of people who would believe in spirituality, we'll say.
Spiritualism is there, yeah. They're away from the faith, but they're still connected in some way to the divine. I would say
Yes.
yes.
And so when a person who's connected to the divine sees child sacrifice, sees the divine creation being destroyed, they can't but object.
Part of the fundamental reason some of these people are the way they are is because they see the beauty in everyone, and this is why they have, let's say, the ability to love the opposite sex in that manner, right? And that's why the conflict that must be in some of the minds of these people must be difficult to deal with on a daily basis. But the
And
fact that
that's the suffering we have to relieve.
yeah,
We have to relieve that suffering for them. Sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
but the fact that they are throwing their hat in with us, ideologically different. Like I would like argue with, like, I have no problem with gay people, but I would argue with them on the logic of the whole thing, because it goes against nature. But they're still throwing their hat in with the likes of me and you, because trans is so repugnant to the human spirit. I mean, people are walking away from their identities. They're like, it is essentially the death of their identity when they change from one version of a person to another in such a short period based on something they saw on the internet. And then when surgery starts happening, self-harm, that's actual
That's yeah.
that's actual conversion therapy.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
conversion is complete there. One time you would be very fearful of people taking action in favor of propaganda, that it was irreversible, that people become conditioned in favor of the propaganda to take action. But these people are mutilating their bodies. So what level of commitment are they to the doctrine when they mutilate? Like it is Jonestown. It
well,
is it is
it's a pure cult. Like the moment you even like if you're taking a tablet because your physiological condition is too strong, in like let's say, oh, my male, I'm too much of a male, so I have to take this tablet to reverse the things that are inconvenient to my desired perception of self, and it's all lies. Like it's totally dishonest to themselves. Um, they have to lie to themselves to get across the line of the trans thing. Gay people don't have to lie to themselves. This is the fundamental difference. There can be a totally honest identity in a gay person, but the identity of any trans person is completely based on dishonesty and like also psychological conditions like autogynephilia and all this kind of stuff. It's all based in rubbish, and it's stuff
well,
that
you see,
can easily be resolved. But there's so much
yeah,
pressure from the government now.
it would easily be resolved because basically what's happening is, you know, being whatever kind of person you are, or whatever kind of personality you are, it does take quite a bit of skill to manage that personality in a way that you feel comfortable projecting into the world. Your image, we'll say. And as a person, we give each other plenty of leeway to be very peculiar. But when you can't even handle that, what are you left with? When you can't handle that level of social participation, that you're willing to manage your person in a way that is, I don't want to say acceptable, but putable by society. Society will be prepared to put
But
up with you. If you
you
can't
said
handle that, just one second, I just finished this. What
yeah,
happens instead then is they take on a persona that has three or four characteristics. If I wear a dress and put on certain makeup, if I talk with a high voice, if I give everybody a hard time about my trans rights, if I fill out these four simple little participation dockets every day, then I can be this identity, and I don't have to undertake the complicated identity it is of being a real person in a adversarial, So it's a kind of a cop out, more than you know, I
well,
don't think see it as a conscious kind of a personality. It's a cop out default position that's just easy to manage, you know.
I think among what you've said there, you paraphrased what I'm about to say, which is self-regulation. These people have deferred their identities to the hive mind. So the hive mind decides their identity,
Mm.
and if they feel anyway effeminate as a man or whatever it is, oh shit, I have to take this call, Dara. Yeah,
All right, super.
self-regulation.
Might just have bro. All right. Stephen's a very busy man, and he gets phone calls he has to go away to, but it's always nice to talk to him. Where was I there now? Anybody else want to say anything? Okay, we've 12 minutes on the clock here. Okay. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. Yeah. Hey, Eddie, how's things? Hang on now. I'm going to leave that there. 1 second. Eddie, you're on there.
If you want to get stuff done there, I can leave it. There's no.
Go on,
Are you
no
trying
worries.
to get finished earlier? No, I suppose it's just this there seems to be a lot more to this than than meets the eye, like in terms of the other thing you have is like the money that's to be made out of it by big pharma. I don't know, is it either 1 million or 2 million per person that gets changes over from the hormone therapy for the rest of their life, and also you have the money from the operations. But what a lesbian herself told me, like who's in the community and sees exactly what's going on, she said what they're doing is they're bullying. We'll say like you're like a butch lesbian. What they're saying to them now is you're probably a man, the way that you fancy women and you kind of like to dress masculine. So, like, maybe you should consider changing, because you probably were a man all along. Whereas before, people, you were allowed to be a lesbian and it was fine, you fancied a woman. But now they're sort of working on their minds as well, because a lady told me, like, her friend had got the whole lot done. They you know, the way they take from the whole sleeve of the arm off from the elbow down, like, it's horrific stuff to make the Mickey, like, and you know, she got the tits cut off. She was on hormone therapy. Now she wants to turn back, and your one said her she's after turning back, sorry, but she said her body's completely destroyed, her mind is destroyed, and her health from all the you know, the male hormones and all that. So like they're working on them in different ways. Like, they're even destroying the lesbian and gay community, you know, and they're bullying them
You
the
see,
same as they are women.
they no longer provide them the efficient vehicle for excavating human rights that they used to. Women now are no longer controversial enough that they can open this broad discussion in which they only hope to make a small bit of progress. So the way they work is they open these debates, these huge debates about basic things, and they're happy with a small bit of progress. You know, it's like shoot for the stars, and if you get to the moon, didn't you do 3/4 as good? You know.
Yeah.
So this is so now women haven't fitted that vehicle that can deliver that broad attack on society and deliver an advance in disrupting society or interrupting the norms of society. So then they started using lesbians. So the lesbians then needed their rights, and now the lesbians aren't an efficient enough vehicle, so they're going to throw them under the bus now as well. And now you have to be trans, you know. So they keep escalating the extreme of the victim to push the civil rights and human rights debate in a direction that they want, to extremes, you know. And we keep falling for this emotional blackmail for each of the victims as we go along. Society is blackmailable at that level. So back 40, 50, 100 years ago, society was able to relate to women not having the vote. And then 20, 30, 40 years ago, society was able to relate to lesbians not being treated equally. And now today, with the sophisticated morality and the sophisticated political positions of everybody and the sensitivity and the inclusion and all this stuff, this sophisticated frame of mind we all have, we can all feel appropriately disgusted by the treatment of the transgender in our society, and we can give up our freedoms and sacrifice our norms in order to accommodate this latest victim group, you know. So that's the blueprint.
But I suppose as well, like, when you look at it, and it's the same with this, you know, we'll say the refugee crisis or whatever, like, there's certain people that are decent people that have a lot of empathy, but they're actually using that against them as well. You know, I'd imagine some of the left are people that do care about people genuinely, not the likes of Paul Murphy, no, but they're turning that in them to sort of abuse them, if you know what I mean. And it's the same with, you know, people that want to help everyone, but they're using, you know, they're using their empathy to sort of further a more devious cause.
Yes, it's exploited. It's the emotional blackmail, you know. So they don't try to blackmail them with money. They use these empathetic people are most efficiently and reliably blackmailed using emotion.
The
So you
last thing
create a
I'd
victim.
say, and I leave it. You know what? I suppose what a fella, someone described it to me recently, was it's like the overprotective mother. They destroy both their kids and they destroy all around them as well, even though they have the best intentions.
The all-devouring, overprotective helicopter mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And you know, that said, it is a force that we could harness if the overprotecting mother became aware just how much of a threat their child faced every day. You know, that's something that could turn scary if you were a modern Irish politician.
Yeah, I suppose you have a
I'd have
point here.
to, can I jump in there? I'd have to agree 100% what you said there, Dara, about the overprotecting mother, because anyway, between the jigs and the reels, without going into detail, that my folks are nearly on the way out, and fucking what I'd be thinking that when you bring down the grey hair brigade, involving fucking what would you call it? You know, officialdom. It actually stands to you.
Oh,
I'm just going to leave that
absolutely.
there.
Yeah,
As in, like,
I,
because you're suddenly realizing that when you're dealing with authority, whether it be the guards or the court, that when you bring in, if you don't have any family members with you, in the court, they just think you're different, like, in that
yes,
sense.
it's very important.
Um,
Yeah. But you
it
see, then as
is
well,
no,
it's the person has nothing to lose. This is what it is about the grey hair brigade. They don't have a lot to lose. I mean,
yeah.
generally, it's the frame of mind that we have when we're in these situations is very, very important. And if if you're going up against a bunch of people who are in their mid 70s to mid 80s, they're not too worried about what you're going to do to them further down the road. You know.
No, but they think if you're dealing with a young person, they think about their own parents.
Well, this is it, and you see, I'm getting a lot of feedback there. I wonder, I'm not on a speaker anywhere behind you or anything, am I?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry, I gotta plug it out. No,
Okay,
we're good now.
that's a lot better. I
Yeah,
was going to
sound out.
say, you see, one of the things is something I've forgotten to talk about. Um, what was it at all? I have it written down here somewhere. Vertical patience, conservative left wing. It was the nothing to lose, wasn't it? That's fucking gone now. I'm sorry. I said that about the speaker and I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, man.
What were we talking about? What were we saying?
No, we were just talking about bringing the grey hair brigade into the fucking, whether it be dealing with guards or the courthouse or officialdom. That's what we were talking about.
And it was the attitude when you're
The attitude towards,
dealing.
because most of the people that we'd be dealing with would be a young crowd, and they'd know about Jesus if they've got parents
Oh yeah.
themselves.
So yeah, that's the thing I wanted to say yesterday. I started to say this, and it's about our freedoms and how we protect them, and our attitude when we're doing it. So if we go out with the idea, freedom, we guarantee each other's freedoms. We don't guarantee our own freedom. I believe if you're fighting for your own freedom, you're a slave. That's who fights for their own freedom. Is the fella chained to the pole, breaking rocks all day. That's all he can think about is his own freedom. But if you're a person who lives in a society, you're in a social contract to protect everybody else's freedom. And that's how you know you live in a free society, and that's the power of a free society, is that we can commune, um, we can come together around each other's freedom. So I think there's a level of desperation in our current struggles that is equivalent to the person tied to the pole breaking rocks, where we're so threatened, we feel so threatened that our struggle is more about our fears and our struggle for our own freedom. Whereas I have, throughout my life, always found it much easier to defend other people, and I'm much easier motivated to defend other people than to defend myself. I don't tend to defend myself. I find it boring, and
I'm in agreement with you.
so I actually have found it easier all my life and easier to motivate myself to defend other people. So when I go to an event or I go get involved in opposition, I'm doing it from the point of view of defending other people's freedom. And it gives me this more outgoing kind of, it's about other people attitude than a person who is tied to a pole breaking rocks and comes to an event to defend their own freedom. That the person who's defending their own freedom is in a very threatened, hyper aware, hypersensitive place, and it's very insular, and they're actually a victim of the Saul Alinsky rules for radicals disruption, and they've become isolated because of the Saul Alinsky tactics, and that's a big difference between people, and that's what you see with the Grey Brigade. Somebody's mic is in the wind there. Um,
Oh yeah, it
uh,
is.
so
Sorry.
so that's what you see in the Grey Brigade, is they come out to fight for other people. They come out to fight for they at 85 years of age, You know, you can you another 2 years of torture in a nursing home. You know, that's what you've got ahead of you. You know, so they're not fighting for themselves. They're fighting for the direction of society. You know, and
Yeah,
it's that's why
yeah,
it's so powerful. It's so pure. It's so powerful.
that's the truth. Here,
'Cause
look, I'm going to jump off there now. Thanks for letting us speak tonight, or this evening. So I'll talk to you again tomorrow or the day after, whenever you have your
Super,
live feed.
super. All right, bud.
All right, all the best.
Mind yourself, Slán. Hey, I see a channel claiming to be Alan, but there's a lot of channels claiming to be Alan. Alan, are you there? Alan, you have to press the button on your own phone to turn on the mic.
I get you. Yeah, that's me, man. How are you doing?
Hey, Alan, how's things, man? Long time no speak, bro.
Long time no speak. And I tell you one thing, things have changed an awful lot since 2019, haven't they?
Whoo, whoo. Yep, yeah, Alan, they sure have, man. They sure have. In what now, 4 or 5 years that I've known you, Alan. It's come a long way. It's come a long way from Air Square.
That's come a long way. And I tell you one thing. See, the one thing that we have on our side in the grand scheme of things is the one thing the far left are great at doing is to great at creating enemies. Like, and that's all they've been doing now over the past few years is just making more and more and more and more enemies. Like, and a lot of people who were coming onto our side, like these are people who would have known Paul Murphy, they would have stood by people like within the water protests, like they would have supported Sinn Féin, voted for Sinn Féin, and it's now all of them have just completely turned against them. So like it's just in a sense, like their hard approach is essentially going to completely backfire them, like because that's all they're doing is creating enemies while we've created friends, you know.
Well, you see, don't underestimate your effect there and their ability to create enemies because of the things that you do, Alan, and that we all do. I mean, we force them to take positions on our utterances, our policies, the things that we argue about. So one of their followers sees us talking about something and goes back and asks them a question. And over a period of time, because they adjust their position to probably a more ridiculous position, let's face it, because they never really answer a question, do they? So because they're forced to react to us, because we force them to change their positions or to clarify positions, to take a side on a topic, eventually over time, over a number of years, their ideologies become more extreme. And this
Yeah,
is
and
why
it's
they have more
marginalizing
and
them
more
more.
enemies. Yeah,
Because that's how I see things like change now. Like I'm watching, like perhaps see brilliant work up in Belfast. Like that was a massive success in the grand scheme of things. Like, and like I think that is the a spark of new wave of feminism to a certain degree. Like I think this will be the fifth wave of feminism is fighting back what uh like they're like what the culture Marxists are trying to effectively push in now.
well, I can tell you they have a much better and a much closer opinion of equality than the current shower. These women, it's adversarial, but that's where you get equality is through adversary, and we can't be afraid of it. You know, we're instead of dancing around and you know eggshells and kid gloves. Let's just have the adversarial event, and we'll get through it. You know, we're tough. We can handle it.
Well, the things are changing. Like it's being spoken about, like all through American media. Like you have the trans killers. They're calling it trans terrorism, where it's just more and more offense. Uh, like just acts of terrorism, which are actually being openly committed by trans activists, and it's just little things like that need to happen. For example, but like for example, if you look at the legal system here, like I submitted like 300 or 400 pieces of evidence against Antifa, like, and the guards went off and turned around and they're like, well, how do you know you're not a fascist? Like, yet, like, regardless of a constitutional rights that states that like her livelihoods should be protected by the Gardaí and by the state from unjust attacks. Like they're openly and actually promoting it, and it seems that like they've nearly resorted down to like these personal vendettas against certain activists where they'll try to make their lives as hard as possible. But in a sense, like what doesn't kill you makes it stronger, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, you know, and there is an unwillingness from any Garda to engage any counter-narrative complaints because they know the consequences to their career. Um, their superiors have been promoted on their basis of accepting narratives, of accepting the orthodoxy from the state and acting in a manner and only allowing the resources of the Gardaí to be applied in a manner that support the narratives being pumped out by the state. As a money making, as simply the importance of that relationship is comes down to the money. It would be no good to have for the government to have money making schemes like they do if a Gardaí were once in a while to arrest a bunch of them for making money illegally. So um, it really is one of the most important relationships in this structure is the relationship between our government and the police, and it's local government as well, because as you know, local government councillors can actually make bylaws that are enforceable by the police, and it is done most often with commercial concern rather than national concern. And so we already have a framework for government, local government, and business to implement laws at a very basic and local level uh, in support of narratives, and just fail to offer basic support to anti-narrative agendas or complaints.
Yeah, but it seems like they want to kind of like, but in a sense, it really kind of shows the weakness in the arguments. Like if they have to like nearly just eliminate somebody rather than allow them to kind of like have a platform or have some sort of proper contention, like that really shows like how weak they are. And even if you look at a lot of the protests, like over the past few weeks against asylum seekers and illegal immigrants, like it went off in a force the left to essentially protect their interests, like because a lot of those people who are protesting, calling us racists, Nazis, like whatever, like they're all involved within NGOs, like could be helping teaching English, or they could be like working in admin for like some like NGO. So it's like they're only protecting the €6 billion industry, like, and
Yeah.
they're trying to protect that level of funding that's going into them, like because like if we do ultimately succeed, like a lot of them would be completely irrelevant.
This is it, you know. So they set up in economical structures that support the narratives. So they have a huge boon in these social sciences industries. But basically, you just have people faffing about all day, you know. But they create opportunities for people who are supportive and compliant with narratives, and then there is no opportunities and reduced opportunities for money making for those that are not compliant with the narratives, and they seek to progressively isolate us. And you could see it even during the microcosm of it during the lockdown, when those of us who wouldn't comply with the vaccine narrative, they became increasingly more tyrannical, and you could see that the only thing that was toggling their tyranny was time. You guaranteed that they were going to take a leap forward in tyranny every month. They wouldn't do it, twice in 1 week, but they would do say something from the doll that would have been unthinkable a short time prior. So, they can escalate their tyranny to force compliance as we become more and more isolated. And it's evolutionary, really. It's a similar kind of. They know that politics is downstream from culture. They know that culture is really what drives politics. And what they done with the NGOs, they use the NGOs to drive the culture. So they instead of using the NGO as what the NGOs would force the people to create a certain kind of culture that would demand then the politicians would say, well, this is the kind of politics that matches that kind of culture. So
Exactly, it's a form of Nazism. It's supremacy essentially.
yeah, we know what's best for you, and we're going to put it the other side of you and make you into what we want.
Cheers, Sarah. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, and
You're
keep
welcome,
up
man.
the
It's
great
great
work,
to
man.
talk to you. Ring in anytime, but it's great to hear from you, man.
Same goes, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, but Slán. Right,
Could I
lads.
could I could I add a point before? I know that you like to do it on the hour there, but I was going to add something in there. Somebody else brought it up. I think it was Ed, about the devouring mother. And I wrote an article on this about 2 weeks ago, and I referred to the state as the devouring nanny state, because they're pushing the Munchausen condition. It's state-sponsored Munchausen that's being pushed on single mothers to create this Munchausen by proxy trans shit. This is how all these people come out. So it's like 3 generations of Munchausen, so to speak. And it's actually like a devouring state becoming the parent and creating the conditions in us it needs to gain more control and attention.
Well, can I just say there, to add a bit of flesh to that, Stephen, and why it is state devouring, is because it's only happening on the state dime. Rich people are not paying 1.5 million to transition their kids. You can only do this with a medical card. You can only do this with the support of the state.
It's the working class being
I don't want to say,
targeted.
as soon as I say nobody, there'll be somebody who paid to have their kid transitioned. The number of people who can afford this it's tiny. So that's not how this is all happening. This is all happening using state funding, which has been redirected through the fascist lobbying by pharmaceutical companies and medical companies to redirect this funding their way. It is that simple. It is that fucking tight that they would do that. You know, they've identified a market. They've put the pressure on the politicians. The politicians changed the culture. The culture developed the politics that it needed to produce the outcome that the pharmaceutical corporations wanted. And here we are. Our children are getting defiled inside in schools. It's
like you said there, politics is downstream from culture, and then they generate the culture they need to get the political outcome they need. Like Munchausen by proxy was first discovered in like people trying to impress or get into the in-group in their local communities. But this is like this is the government they're trying to impress. Like they're genuinely trying to be in the establishment. It's so close to Nazi level propaganda, and the new Nazi salute is to chop off your child's genitalia. That's what I think.
oh, dude, sacrifice your genitalia on the altar of the great Communist Party.
Yeah, the title of my article the other day was written in Irish. It was it is not okay to transition your children, and it was a piss take of the communist. It's not okay to eat your children, and I gave the devouring mother analogy in there as well in the state. So
queer is not okay. Queer is not fun. Queer is a ideology designed by Kinsey and John Money using Reichman philosophy. It is not fun. It's disgusting. It's vile. It's the ideology of perverts and pedophiles. And there's nothing funny about it. And there's nothing to be celebrated. And you shouldn't have any pride. You should be mortally ashamed of yourself that you're such a pervert that you would try and do that to anybody. Kinsey was a pedophile. John Money was a paedophile, and Reichman was a paedophile. And no one will tell me that Roderick O'Gorman didn't know who Peter Tatchell was when he had his arm around him at a pride parade in Dublin. How was it there was no pictures of anybody else at the same pride parade that Roderick O'Gorman had his arm around that day? How is it that he managed to pick the most famous paedophile on the planet out of a big crowd and put his arm around and take a photograph? And the fella taking the photograph didn't know who Peter Tatchell was.
Well, he's also Green Party as well. Tatchell is English Green Party, so they're obviously
sure.
Connected.
How could he possibly have known, Stephen? And this is tolerated. This is the level. This is an indictment of our media. Our media are entirely incompetent. Where's that fool from Cork from the Irish Times? What's his name? I love picking on him. What's his name?
I don't bother learning off these fucking people's names now.
You know this
I'm,
fella.
I'm no support here.
How isn't he? He didn't have anything to say about it. How is it we have the institution of the Irish Times and the institution of the Irish Independent, and they can't see paedophilia written all over the cabinet?
Well, we see that UN report now, Dara, that's officially calling for the decriminalisation of paedophilia because it's a breach of children's rights not to give them access to sexual access to adults. is a breach of children's rights now, according to that UN report. Now, who generated the report for the UN? The fucking Council of Jurists. So this is like a group of judges and solicitors and barristers from all around the fucking world. So
Wow.
all we have to do is find the link between Martin Nolan and that report, and boom. So that's what I'm investigating today. Having
Go
a
on,
little
boy.
research.
Oh, sure. Look at, it's a daisy chain that links those people. I can tell you that. It's
Yeah.
a daisy chain. Yeah.
But can you imagine that there's a council of fucking judges who are not supposed to preempt or change the law in this manner? They're not supposed to have any input on the fucking legislature. And there they are fucking creating a report to change the fucking direction of legislation at UN level. And that's going to filter down now into our policy making. And, then our judges go, sure, it's the law. Well, like that. That's how fucking sick this thing is. You should look into it, man. I have. I'll tell you what. I'll send you on the link after. There's a whole PDF of the fucking thing, and the wording of it is just. It's the most pedophilic thing ever.
Stephen, I appreciate it, man. Do send me on that, will you?
I will. Go on, I'll leave it on now.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for your contribution. I'll read that. Anybody else want to say it before I hang up? It was there was one other thing I wanted to say there. Maybe I said it today. I said enough, lads. What? I said enough today. I really wish you'd ring in and give me a hard time. Maybe not today. I'm sick. Here, Connor. How's things, man? Hey, Connor, you're on there. Connor.
It doesn't seem to have enabled him to speak. It looks like he's still
Oh,
muted.
sorry. Here, Connor. There you go. Seriously.
Yes, I'm here to give you a hard time, Dara. Don't you worry. Dara, I had great hopes for this channel, this podcast, because I thought, right, here we go. Dara's an activist. He's going to be talking about activism, how to get out, instead of talking to the echo chamber, how we're going to talk outside, how we're going to get these next tranches. But it seems to me it's slipping into the same thing as Ireland and lockdown, off-grid Ireland, the same thing. I know you try and talk about activism, but I appeal to you, get these people back out of the stop doing it's just a copy. It's just becoming a carbon copy of all the other echo chamber things where we're sharing our latest evidence. We're having a therapeutic whinge fest about how terrible thing is. It's all descriptive. It's not. There's nothing solution. There's not much solution oriented. You have to be harder with people. You have to be more direct with them. Otherwise, it's just going to be the same as all the other stuff. Over, done.
Okay, Connor. Thanks for your input, and I do appreciate what you're saying. And I am intending on getting people to become more acquainted with action than typing and talking. I just have learnt over the last number of years that ordering people to do things doesn't work unless you're in an army, and we're not. And none of us are obligated to each other at all, other than our duty to this nation. And I found over the years that approaching something from the front, it doesn't work. And sometimes things are too important for them not to work. And when you're dealing with things that are too important for them not to work, one has to be very sure that the pressure you apply is effective. I just want to say it that way to achieve that result. I've also noticed as well that many of the reasons that people don't get active or more active is really mindset, and that the issue isn't so much that they don't know what to do or where to do it or who to do it with. It's more that they talk themselves out of doing things, and they attach beliefs that they have about topics to things that other people are saying and doing. And that may not be what the other person believes at all when they're saying and doing things, but that they have a fearful disposition that they tend to attach to other people's events and things that are happening. So it's my intention here to empower people socially rather than to direct people to action. And I think, as a group of people who have been so pressurized over the last number of years and dehumanized and stigmatized, and the worst of pressure applied to people, their families destroyed, their careers destroyed, their homes destroyed, their lives destroyed. Now, at this time, I think it's more about frame of mind. We have to adopt a general sense of a confident frame of mind. And it's not that hard to do, really. It requires a bit of faith in yourself. And in order to have faith in yourself, you must hear your opinions, the opinions you hold, being vocalized by other people as being true and correct. And this is why I feel wondering about topics is important on a public forum, because what it means is most people won't interact, most people won't get involved, but they do listen. And if we discuss enough opinions, and if we endorse enough opinions that we have over this show when we're talking about topics, I hope that that endorsement, be it from me or from the other participant, is something that gives a listener confidence. And I'm not shooting for big numbers. I don't want thousands. Well, I'd be delighted to have thousands of people listening to my show, but I'm not making a show for thousands of people. I'm making a show for a few people that I know, and that I know are active, and that I know are downtrodden and in a lock. They're blocked, and I'm trying to unlock those people, and I'm trying to get them to see, that their effects are broad and dynamic. And I know that those people that I'm talking to, the people that I know, who have been my colleagues over the last number of years, I know that if they get active, that they can bring those local groups that they were active in throughout the last number of years. When the government was watching the likes of me and Andy and Dave and the lads, they weren't watching these other small groups getting to know each other and become familiar with each other and to trust each other and to value each other's opinion and each other's company. And there are hundreds of, if not thousands, of these groups all over Ireland. And I'm not talking to people who are wet behind the ears. That's not who I'm talking to. And I don't need to treat them as a kind of a remedial class for activism. Moreover, I need them to have the skills that they can retain a sense of contentment in the face of the adversary they face, the nastiness they face, and to retain that contentment independently of this show or anybody else, and not need emotional support when dealing with people like this. And as well, I want people to see us not gaslight each other, and not to use gaslighting as a means of communication. And we fall foul to gaslighting too much, and it's their trick for dragging us back into the narratives. So I also want to practice outside of narrative conversation, where yes, we do discuss the narratives, but not with the language of the prescribed narrative. Where we give people a vocabulary here that they can oppose the narrative, and the language of opposition in that narrative, and not the language of inclusivity and this prescribed language that we have inside these narratives. And it's a frame of mind as well, Connor. And if we're going to have the frame of mind of people who are going to operate inside these tunnels, narrative tunnels, I don't think we're going to be very successful. And we have to forget about narratives altogether and stories altogether. And we have to go back to our civil duty. We're trying to involve each other in each of our stories all the time, when really we shouldn't be doing that. We should be involving our family in our story and our friends in our story, but the rest of our time we should be protecting each other's freedoms, and not seeing how your freedoms interact with my freedoms and do they conflict. We don't meet each other most of the day. We don't meet each other from one end of the year to the other. It doesn't matter that the way you exercise your freedoms conflicts with the way I exercise my freedoms, because we don't come into contention. But here today, we're here on this particular point, and we're not going to discuss the other things that we disagree on, and we're going to focus on this point, and we're not going to allow people gaslight us into a different conversation. Because here we are a week after an event called Let Women Speak, and we're still talking about trans rights. It's all about trans rights, and we're not talking about trans rights. We don't want doctrination of our kids in school, and we don't want women erased from the dictionary. We didn't even mention trans in that whole thing. But you can't find a piece of journalism with that in there. So I don't know if I answered Connor. I started to wander again. But here, Mike, how's things, Mike? Mike, you're on. You have to press the button on your phone, Mike, as well.
It looks like it's on your side there still.
Oh, is it? How can you tell from there, man? Oh, it is on my side. Sorry, there you go, Mike. I didn't have it turned on. Mike? Hey, Mike. Sorry, dude. I didn't have it turned on. It was my end. Okay. Well, hey. Yeah, so this isn't going to be just another show, Connor. And, I might share traits with these other great institutional chats that are going on Telegram. And indeed, I do share many conversation with the lads privately, and they're great folk. And I'm very conscious of not being another anything. I'm trying to stay away from reporting the news. I'm trying to stay away from reporting on events, and I'm trying to. There's certain things I'm not doing intentionally, and I will post news articles sometimes, but that's more for me to have something to talk about when I'm out walking around. I can go back and go through the news articles, and I don't need to have my notebook with me or my sitting at a table. But yeah, I appreciate Connor's input there this evening, and any of you guys that want to say anything, that's great. Anytime you want. Okay, lads, we will leave it there for today, and talk to you guys tomorrow.